Dear organizers and participants of the conference, allow me to introduce the paper, Risks of the Methodology for Forecasting the Price of Bitcoin and the Frequency of its Online Requests in the Digitalization of Economic Systems. The research grounded the approach and the forecasting procedure for the series of dynamics of the price of Bitcoin and the frequency of its online requests, which in essence correspond to the basic principles of the implementation of the forecasting methodology, take into account the specifics of the formation of the frequency of online requests for Bitcoin prices and the socio-economic meaning of its functioning. The purpose of the paper is to study the time series of dynamics of the frequency of requests for Bitcoin, taking into account the risk of using various forecasting methods. The object of the research is the time series of the frequency of requests for Bitcoin in Ukraine according to Google Trends and Bitcoin price. The subject of the research is the risks of forecasting series of dynamics. Today, the results of researches of the Bitcoin price time series dynamics in the context of explaining the laws of its changes by the situation of modern economic theories have proved their practical value. Also, the activity and behavior of market agents in general were taken into account. In particular, the influence of social networks and the structure of the formed cryptocurrency market, which is constantly evolving, was noted and is being improved. On the third slide, models and methods for forecasting on the cryptocurrency market are presented. The forecasting methodology should include the use of several methods to develop a forecast and select the best of them based on estimates of the accuracy and quality of the forecast. Thus, the authors proposed a methodology for predicting the price of Bitcoin and the frequency of online requests for Bitcoin, which consists of 4 interrelated steps. To research the series of dynamics, the authors selected several approaches to forecasting, econometric models and nonlinear dynamics methods, among which the best results were shown by neural networks and Arima models. The autoregressive integrated moving average Arima model and neural network autoregressive NR model were chosen. The set of initial statistics consists of 2 time series, namely the frequency of online requests for Bitcoin in Ukraine and the price of Bitcoin. Time series were generated using data from Google Trends and Invest Funds for the period from January 18, 2015 to January 12, 2020. The initial data are weekly values, and the observation base was 261 periods. Thus, the regulatory independence of Bitcoin has led to a close relationship between its price and demand, which proves the similarity of the series of request frequency and Bitcoin price in figure on the slide 5. In accordance with the data, as we can see, the price of Bitcoin is quite volatile. In the studied time series of the price of Bitcoin, there is a high variability of values, as evidenced by the coefficient of variation, which is 91%. The indicated sensitivity of the frequency of online requests to exchange rate fluctuations of Bitcoin is more pronounced than in other currencies. In particular, between the exchange rates of the euro, the dollar and the frequency of their online requests, which presented on the slide 6. And this is logical, since at the given moment all states are trying to limit the possibility of the outflow of the national currency from the country by means of cryptocurrencies and technologies. In accordance with the proposed methodology, the next step is to build models for predicting the study time series, namely the price of Bitcoin and the frequency of requests. To build the models, use the tools of the R environment, namely the forecast library. The time series was divided into training and test sets. The training set was 96% of the data, 251 values, data from January 18, 2015 to November 3, 2019, and the test set was 4% of data, 10 values, from November 10, 2019 to January 12, 2020. By analyzing the data in fifth slide, we can state that there are peaks and drops in the trend direction in the time series. The investigated time series are non-stationary, which confirms the advanced Dickey-Fuller test. On the other hand, with a fairly high level of confidence, it can be argued that the first-order differences of the series are stationary, that is, these are integrated first-order time series. There is no seasonal component in the time series, but a random component is present. In the medium term, compare the predictive models of Arima and the neural network. In slide 7 shows the constructed predictive models for the test set of the time series, the price of Bitcoin. Compare the obtained predicted values for the constructed models with real data in the test set. From the graphical representation of the shows that the predicted data of the NR model 7.7 are closer to real ones. From slide 8, as we can see, the obtained forecast data do not go beyond the 95% confidence interval, that is, there is a fairly accurate forecast. This is also evidenced by the value of the mean absolute percentage error. For Arima it is 18.4%, and for the neural network 6.1%. Therefore, for medium-term forecasting of the price of Bitcoin, it is better to use a neural network NR7 since the forecast will be more accurate. The results of forecasting the price of Bitcoin for the next 10 weeks, January 19, 2020 March 22, 2020, using the model NR are presented in slide 9. In accordance with the forecast, the price of Bitcoin in this period will have a decreasing trend and decrease by 25.6%. For the time series of the Bitcoin request frequency from Ukrainian online users, the best Arima model for test data was Arima 010. And the best neural model for the time series of requests for Bitcoin is the NR87. Comparing the predicted values for the obtained models with real data in the test sample, we see that they do not go beyond the 95% confidence interval. The mean absolute percentage error value for the Arima model is 9.09%, and for the neural network 11.7%. But it should be noted that the Arima model 0 is a random walk model, so the forecast can be made only one period ahead. Therefore, this model can only be used for short-term forecasting. For medium-term forecasting of requests for Bitcoin of Ukrainian online users, a neural network model was used, namely NR87. The results of forecasting the frequency of requests, Bitcoin, by Ukrainian online users for the next 10 weeks, January 19, 2020, March 22, 2020, are presented in the slide 13. According to the forecast, the frequency of requests Bitcoin of Ukrainian online users in this period will increase by 41.7%, from 12 interest over time to 17 interest over time per week. Thus, it is forecasted that the average frequency of requests will increase by 2.4% weekly. The article defines the approach and forecasting procedure for the studied series of dynamics, which essentially correspond to the basic principles of the forecasting methodology and takes into account the specifics and socioeconomic content of the price of Bitcoin and the frequency of online requests about it. Based on the results of applying forecasting methods to the study time series of dynamics, it was determined that the processes of self-organization of the Bitcoin functioning mechanism provide for the advisability of using forecasting methods with internal procedures for self-learning, self-tuning and adaptation in real time. So, the minimum risks for the study of the Bitcoin price time series dynamics were demonstrated by the neural network methodology in comparison with the use of the Arima model. Although estimates of forecasting quality using the methods used are generally acceptable, the risk of using the Arima model methodology also lies in the fact that its advisability can be limited only to short-term forecasting for one period, while neural network technology justifies itself in medium-term forecasting tasks. Given the dynamism and daily updating of data on the parameters of Bitcoin, in practice it most often manifests itself in short-term forecasting, while for basic research is medium and long-term forecasting. Since the authors have proved that an increase in the frequency of requests, Bitcoin, corresponds to its high volatility in the direction of increase, it is logical to say that in the forecast period, the dynamics of the price of Bitcoin will be characterized by high variability and an increase will take place after a certain decline.